other monks in Scotland, and he taught them the art of making whiskey. And that's how whiskey began to spread slowly throughout the world. If you go to Scotland and you ask the same question, you'll get a very, very similar answer. It was about the year 1500, and a Scottish monk discovered the art of making whiskey purely by chance. And it's at this point that you notice that everything that they say about Scotsmen being tight with their money is true. The story continues. When the Irish people came to Scotland to visit on business trips, because the Scots were too lazy to go on trips, or too tight to go on trips, then the Scotsmen taught the Irish how to make whiskey, and so it spread throughout the world. Let's do a quick survey. I like surveys; they're fun. Who of you think that it was the Scots that originally invented whiskey? Marcus. What? There's a few. There's a few. Well, I'm going to tell you in a minute. Okay, and who of you think it was the Irish? Ooh, I think that's about. I think it's slightly more for the Irish. Unfortunately, you're wrong. But so were the others.
It was the Americans.
It was the Americans. Oh,
in the 1500s.
Just a slight aside for the few Germans among you. We could, of course, believe certain advertising things on television and say, "Wer hat's erfunden?" Who invented it? There's a very famous advert in Germany for what is Rucola, isn't it? Yes, yeah. Anyway, beside the point. It wasn't the Irish and it wasn't the Scots. Why am I telling you this? Well, if we look back at the year 1500, where they're both claiming to have invented whiskey, whiskey was completely different to what it is now. Whiskey was just basically some sort of distilled beer, something made of some sort of grain in some description, and it was pretty unpleasant, to be fair. If we take that definition and we search through history and try and figure out where it all started, we've got to go back a really long time. We've got to go back 4,500 years. 2,500 years before Christ, in Egypt and in China. We've got the first examples of the creation of grain-based spirits. Now we know for a fact that these days whiskey, I'm sorry ladies but it's true, is a man's world. Tasting like this, mostly men. Fortunately a few pretty women in between to make life bearable for me. You've just got to put up with looking at me, that's fine. Most of the men, as I said, out of the 100 or so distilleries in Scotland, 3 of them are run by women. Only 3. But they are some of the best whiskies made. And I'm not just saying that because to be nice to the women. I'm saying that because they really are very good whiskies. Way back, 4,500 years ago, whiskey was something for women. Have we got any Arabic speakers? No Arabic speakers, that's a shame. If you go back to very ancient Arabic languages, the word al-khul means eye makeup, mascara, perfume. It was anything made from these distilled beers, but they didn't use it to drink. They made perfumes and they made makeup from it, so the women could look beautiful, and maybe the dead bodies could be looked after and made to look good for their journey onto the afterlife. We know that the Egyptians and the Chinese were travelling the entire known world at the time on trips. Someone's buzzing. It's not in my pocket, it's not interesting. We know that they travelled, and we know that they traded the knowledge and the technologies that they had with other cultures and other peoples that they met. And we know that 500 years before Christ, that this perfume, this whatever it was they created, had landed in Central Europe. where the Celtic peoples were. Now the Celts were a group of assorted small tribes who stuck together, fought together, lived together, died together. And they were most definitely making something similar to this. But, again, not as a drink. They were making it as a basis for perfume. And they stayed in Central Europe for a long time and eventually got driven out by the Romans. And the Romans just came up from the south and marched across the whole of Europe and drove the Celtic peoples further and further away until they landed in Britain.
Making wine all the way.
Well, making something all the way, certainly. Probably wine, probably
wine.
Sweet beer as well.
That's what they brought to Europe, wine.
And a lot of mascara.
And a lot of mascara. Yeah. And eventually, the Scottish, or the Celtic people got pushed up to Scotland, up to, down to Wales, across to Ireland, and then way, way down to the deepest, darkest southwest of England, which is where I come from originally, to Cornwall and Devon. There's an awful lot of Celtic peoples still down there. And at some point during this transition phase, this stuff stopped being makeup. Ow, that stings. And started being a drink. Now no one knows how this happened except me. And I'm going to share it with you. This will be in the news soon. As soon as I can prove it, it'll be in the news. One of these Celtic leader guys came home one evening from the pub. And he was kind of pretty drunk. And he thought to himself, before I go to bed, I need one last drink. In German they call it an Absacker. It's the last one that flattens you. And so he went to the cupboard where he normally kept all his alcohol, and he opened the cupboard and he looked in there and there was a dead computer mouse and some paperwork. And he thought, well, that's no use, there's nothing. And then he went out into the kitchen to his fridge and opened that up. No alcohol. And then he went out into the garage and looked through all the cases of beer and all the other stuff that he had. Every single bottle was empty. So very, very sad and very dejected and slightly drunk, he wandered towards the bedroom. And when he got into the bedroom, he saw his lovely bed with his lovely wife doing what lovely wives all around the world do at that time of night. And he thought, oh my God, I need that last drink. And right beside the bed, he saw a table. On the table was a little bottle of the wife's perfume. And he was just drunk enough. So he picked up this bottle of perfume and he pulled the stopper out of it and he set it to his lips. And then fell into bed.
Abgesagt.
So the next morning when he woke up, the first thing that he thought was, well, actually, you know, that stuff was pretty damn good. If only they'd leave out the fucking lavender. And so he started playing around with it. And he started probably creating something.
I think I know what you meant. Yeah.
The whiskey, Chris, the whiskey. You've got things on your brain that shouldn't be on your brain. And my assumption is that from that moment on he started creating something that you didn't put on your face or sprinkle on dead bodies and waste, but you put in a glass and enjoyed and drank.